something I did about 11 years ago. So there needs to be an intrinsic change in our DNA. We will design the building in such a way that the topography is not touched.
On Net Zero by Design, the intelligence of living architecture. Before we begin, we would like to extend our heartfelt thanks to all our valued brand and exhibitor partners, our experience partner, JSW Dulux, our e-commerce partner, RQ, our gallery partners, LE Home, Designment, Kalaspurti, and Studio Nova. We also express our sincere appreciation to our exhibitor partners whose participation has been integral to this event. Now, as we move forward, it is time to introduce the brilliant mind who has joined us today to share her valuable insights and expertise. Suhasini Iyer is an architect and urban planner and the principal architect of Orville Design Consultants, a department of the Orville Center for Scientific Research, a trust registered under the Orville Foundation. The multidisciplinary studio undertakes design and execution across scales, from educational and institutional campuses to corporate and residential environments. In collaboration with government bodies, she has led and advised several applied research projects focused on achieving adaptive thermal comfort in hot, humid climates. Her expertise lies in earth architecture and the adaptive reuse of construction and industrial waste, creating buildings that integrate water and energy management into their very fabric. Now, it is my pleasure to welcome you to the stage. Welcome, ma'am.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Suhasini from Orville. We're going to talk about net zero, but I don't want to just showcase the projects that we have done that could be a few steps forward in net zero. I really want to talk about the challenges that we have in this country for working towards net zero first. And before we start talking about our challenges, I want to talk about the challenges that we have as human beings itself, because at the end of the day, that is where our main challenge is. So, human history in brief. And I want you to keep this in mind. I have tried my best. This is something I did about 10, 11 years ago. Try to put the history of our species on this planet in a simple matrix to show that there is something intrinsically challenging in our DNA, okay? And that is from that point, we need to work forward. Basically, if you look at it, I've put it in 4 columns. The stages of human society. What are the developmental tools and resources that we developed during these stages? What was the kind of methodology that we used, and what was the output of it? So if you look at it, the tribes, and in this, we were in this stage of human society for almost 1.5 million years. Most of it was stone tools and weapons, group hunting, and there is enough documentary and paleontological records to show that the loss of megafauna in 4 continents was because of human migration. So it was not us. It's right from the beginning. There is an underlying problem in our DNA, okay? Then when agriculture, whether it's the Fertile Crescent, Indus Valley, or in the Sham Valley or whatever, settlements, the tools was metal, to plow the land and to defend the land. The methodology was monoculture, kill off everything else so that you could grow only what was useful to you, right? And there was a huge loss of biodiversity as the result of the agricultural revolution. Then came religions. And you can chart the history of different religions from different ecosystems, and each one has its own blueprint based on the ecosystem. But religions, hierarchical society and urbanization, because urbanization requires order, order requires regulation, regulation requires command and control. So religion fulfills the tool that is needed to urbanize. But with a hierarchical society, what happens is human exploitation. Now we don't have the animals, we don't have the vegetation, so we exploited each other, feudalism and slavery, and that was almost 2000 years. Then, the last 500 years, industrial revolution. What was your developmental tool? Colonies. And so they had transcontinental exploitation as the methodology to feed this stage of human evolution. And so they stole from other people and cultures. We are a product of that. But today, and I would say the last 100 years, the post-industrial society, the developmental resource is fossil fuel. It is an exploitation of the deep past, and a very deep past. It is from the Carboniferous era, which is at least, 300 million years ago. And what are we doing when we are doing that is that we are stealing from our future. So at every stage of human evolution on this planet, all we have been able to do is destroy to build. We don't know how to do otherwise. Unless there's destruction, we don't know how to develop. So there needs to be an intrinsic change in our DNA to find out how do we develop without destroying. And that is a challenge, whether it's net zero or sustainable or green architecture or anything. And if you do not forget this, that at every step, be conscious that there's something in you that is beyond your control, which is always destructive. Where do I point? Yeah. So within that framework, if you look at net zero, what is net zero? It's actually about balancing greenhouse gases that are released with the amount that are removed. Okay? So if you're putting out 2 tons of greenhouse gases, you have to be able to remove 2 tons. So only then you're net zero. So, but to achieve this, given the fact that we know from human history, unless we legislate it, we regulate it, we monitor it, we evaluate it, we enforce it, this equation is not going to happen, where emissions minus removal equals 0. How are we going to do otherwise? I mean, especially we as Indians know very well how to sidestep and go around any regulation. I think if I could say what is the most unique quality of India is our patience about how we can bypass regulations. We can do that very patiently. So, I keep pointing in the wrong direction, but that must be. So in this context, Indian context, net zero cannot be reduced to a carbon accounting exercise, because we desperately need development. Social equity is something that we would like to forget, but it has to be dealt with. Otherwise, we are going to be having huge problems in this country. And the impact of climate change on the overall economy. Presently, we are facing this summer quite a bit of economic impact, not just due to the war in the Middle East, but due to climate change. The heat wave that is going around the country has a huge impact on the unorganized sector, which is almost employing 90% of the people in this country, okay? So unlike developed nations, which can just focus on decarbonizing their existing system, we really need to build a future while we're also building a net zero future. So we have a dual challenge. It's not just about net zero, but we need to actually build a future also at the same time. Now, this is the last verified data that I could build, and please remember this is by sector. It does not really look at aggregates, okay? So if you look at greenhouse gas emission by sector, energy generation is 40% of the greenhouse gas generation in this country. Why? Because we are a coal-fired energy generation country, right? Now, all the others, agriculture, industry, transportation, building, and waste, comes to 60%. And if you are a very smug, self-satisfied architect, you'll say, buildings is only 6%, yeah. Why are we wasting our time on a Saturday, Sunday, sitting around here talking about net zero? I mean, no matter what we do, we are only impacting the 6%, right? And that is where you have to remember this is greenhouse gas emission by sector where it originates, not the aggregation. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but now what are the different issues that India must address while building a net zero future? Because it's very nice, I come across nice, young, talented architects who do fantastic work and they do net zero buildings. But at the end of the day, it's like saying, I have one tiger alive somewhere in India, and so my biodiversity is assured. I don't want to see one tiger. I want to see tigers established everywhere where they are supposed to be, right? So to be able to do that, we have to take into account this. We have environmental issues. All of you are urban dwellers. Today, I took an auto rickshaw from the hotel in MG Road to come here. I was scared. I was really scared. It's true that I've not taken an auto rickshaw in the last I took was with Chitra in Ahmedabad. But it is scary. I don't know how you people can live here. And those are not the issues here. Air pollution, water scarcity, loss of, no, just the noise, the hecticness, the aggression, all that is never mentioned anywhere. But all those things are resulting in this. The intangible aspects of our lives actually creates air pollution, water pollution. It's not that we are bad people. We want to go and pollute the air. It happens because we are 10 minutes to get from A to B. And who puts the 10 minutes? Not you, not me. Somebody is doing it to us, which makes us aggressive, which makes us wasteful, because we cannot have the time or the energy to consider all these other characteristics, right? We are under pressure to perform for reasons that are beyond our control. And similarly, what happens is then the ecosystem services. What is happening to ecosystem services? We have huge water deficit in this country. Our groundwater tables are falling. Our rainwater is not properly managed, leads to urban floodings. Land and soil degradation is enormous. We manage to still create the illusion that our agricultural sector is quite productive, but in the last 10 years, if you look at the decadal growth rate in terms of employment in the agricultural sector, it has gone steeply down and the output has gone further down in the GDP. And what I understand from day before yesterday, that even the storage of the grains is now going to be a monopoly. So we're handing over our food security to two companies. And I'm sure none of you actually thought what it means, because we still have purchasing power parity, which 60% of the population of this country doesn't have, okay? Energy resource crisis, human development issues, poverty, unemployment, income inequality, education and skill gap, healthcare and nutrition, and then coming to urban issues, which some of us know because we are directly impacted by it, is housing shortage and growth of informal settlements. And usually the growth of informal settlements is felt as an inconvenience. And that is the most devastating part of coming into urban India for me. I remember the statistic in late 1980s, a city like Delhi had about 40% informal settlement. By mid-1990s, it had gone to almost 50%. By 2005-06, it had come down. But today, it has gone to almost 60%. Almost 50-odd% in every metro in this country is what euphemistically put informal settlements, which is basically juggi jhopdi slums and stuff like that. And they are servicing our cities without any access to any of the democratic rights. And of course, inadequately and poorly managed urban infrastructure, which impacts us, so we know about it, environmental degradation and pollution. Now, these issues will need to be addressed while we are addressing the net zero in India. And I don't know if how many of you are aware that as per the constitution, whenever our honorable prime minister goes and signs an accord and says we will sustainable development goals or millennium development goals or the Paris Accord or the net zero accord or in COP31, as per the constitution, these become a law. But there is a loophole. It becomes a law only when it's regulated. It is regulated only if it is actually legislated. It is only legislated if it is agreed by several ministries after doing an entire study. So what do we do? Because we don't, if it becomes a law, we have to budget it, we have to have programs, we have to undertake it. So we do action plans. By doing action plans, you can bypass this entire process that is put together by the Constitution, where between the government and its people, they have to take responsibility for it, account it, provide numbers to verify and audit it. So we do action plans, okay? Now, going back to the greenhouse gas emission, now I'm just taking the building sector by aggregating the energy that is going into the building sector, the transportation that goes into it, the industries that are making the products, the waste that emanates from it. So then if you take it, 30 to 35% of the energy, the greenhouse gases emitted in this country is from the buildings, not 6, like we said. Because if we take cradle to cradle, it is actually 30 to 35%. But out of that, 20 to 22% is in the building operation and maintenance, and 8 to 10 is in the construction materials. And this, I would really like to emphasize to the architects, because our clientele and the market says, I want an earthy house, meko mitti ka ghar chahiye, because I want to be sustainable, right? And it's so difficult to laugh at somebody who's going to be your patron and pay the bills of your office to say, rubbish. You don't know anything about what you're talking about. And the worst part is that you will not be even interested to know better. Because we, as long as we live in ignorance, we can justify our decisions. And justifying our decisions is more important than learning about our prejudices and changing them. Correct? Because that's work. Who wants to do work? Nobody, right? And this is what I'm telling you, is that an intelligently designed building during its entire life cycle uses and emits more greenhouse gases than a few bricks in mud and a few thatch roof. Because if I put a ceramic tile in a building and I use it for 30 years, if I take the cradle to cradle emissions, I have used it. But if I'm actually making a building that is going to be hot, unventilated, badly built, leak in the summer, leak in the monsoon, absorb heat in the summer, require constant maintenance, it doesn't actually live out its life cycle. It's constantly emitting greenhouse gases. So this is where I want to focus on to say, let's talk about design. And after all, we are architects. We are not vendors of material. The focus on material in this country between interiors, landscape, architecture, urban design is getting a bit, I would almost say kind of an obsession. But this obsession is an escapism so that we don't really teach how to design in architecture colleges. We don't work with design as our focal point in offices. The market does not want us to focus on design. The government does not care about design. And the saddest and most pathetic part of the whole story is, as a country, we are actually culturally negating the central aspect of design in our day-to-day lives, the craftsmanship, the skill. I mean, everything from not only the houses we live, the clothes we wear, the kind of food we eat, the kind of social life we live, is all moving away from having a certain cultural consciousness of design that emerges from our ecosystem. You know, we are negating that. And I don't know what we're going to get for it, but obviously, no. So essentially, better design implies lower emission. And best strategy for net zero is intelligent building design. And this is not something that is rocket science. All of us have learned this. I'm going to focus on hot, humid, and warm, humid zones because that is most of the country. Because even the composite climates have much higher humidity now because of the kind of cooling systems we are using. These are simple things, so simple that we think it's simplistic. And because we think it's simplistic, we do not actually keep it in the central focus of what we are doing when we design. You know, and this is taught to us, but taught to us lost in a kind of chaos of words and jargon and all kind of things. No, it's not. It's simple, logical systems that comes out of socio-cultural and scientific thought processes. You don't need to go and get something extra good from somewhere else. It's there. But I'm going to focus on cooling because that is the main challenge that we are facing, right? Now, but cooling is not only about cooling the building because we have other issues that are impacting the cooling of the building over which we do not have much control, but we need to be aware of them so that we can intervene when given a chance. One of the things is, of course, climate change. I mean, all corporates and governments keep telling you. Recently, my prime minister said also, we should drink more water and help the vulnerable, to deal with climate change. Right, it's true. But what else? How are we responsible for this and what can we do? They keep saying, don't use plastic, don't do this. This is just eyewash, distraction, so that they keep you busy and not think about what is really happening behind the curtains. Rapid urbanization, increasing energy demand, and increasing economic inequity. You have, if you would just spend a little bit of time on this economic inequity, you will see how much it actually impacts climate change. The people who emit the least are the most impacted, but how they are exploited is one of the main reasons also that climate change rapidly impacts all of us. Declining investment in public health. So cooling issue is not just about thermal comfort. It affects energy generation systems. One of the things is that I have a map in a slide which was from the 25th of May from Indian Meteorological Department. We'll come to that. Thermal power plants, like the one that is nearest to where I live in Neyveli, is using brown coal, okay? Now, brown coal, for every ton of brown coal, the energy captured that can be actually transmitted to the end user is less than 14 to 16%. Because, not just because of the thermal power plant being outdated in its technology, brown coal being very low in carbon, but more in, carbon that can be captured for energy and carbon that just is let out into the air as pollutants. But the fact that this thermal power plant needs to be cooled to turn heat into electricity. How are they cooling it? Water. Water temperature has to be at a certain degree. With climate change, air temperature increases, water temperature increases. So you need energy to cool thermal power plant to produce energy. So you see, it becomes a kind of a losing cycle. More we warm up, more we're going to produce greenhouse gas to produce coal or thermal power plants. The next is water supply and demand is immediately hit. Waste management, both urban and other ways. Disaster management. So I can have a nice, I can maybe design a nice corporate office in southern Chennai where all corporates have come and settled and even get a LEED certification maybe, but the monsoon, their basement parking is going to be a water holding structure. Come what may. They can throw tons of money to get a platinum rating, but the roads, the drainage system, and the way the land use planning is done, they cannot escape it. Last monsoon, people in these corporate offices parked on flyovers. There were pictures of it because they didn't want their Mercedes and BMW to be floating in the basement, neither in the apartment blocks nor in their offices. So there was double parking in all the flyovers to protect the cars, right? So that's where the focus was. Let's protect the cars. What happened to the people? What happened to the buildings that were built? They got damaged, they had to be repaired, more greenhouse gas emission. Productivity, agricultural, manufacturing, and utilities. Productivity goes rapidly down with higher temperatures and number of hot days per year. Social order and harmony. Now, it's a bit like, if I would personalize this, right? So I have a tough day on the road where I've spent 2 hours getting to work in a car and I've spent 2 hours coming back, stuck in traffic. I've had a bad day, client meeting, this, that, and everything, where I had to keep my equanimity just because I have to. Then I come home and I shout at my kids. They have done nothing, but they are at the receiving end. Why? Because somewhere I have to let it out. And today, every time there is protests, or there are people complaining, or there are social platforms forming of frustrated people, they get the backlash of disciplinary action. But nobody thinks that that social and order and harmony that has been disturbed by these random revolutionaries who don't have a proper job and they don't find time to do anything else but disturb social harmony, they are an output of the frustration that is building up gradually till the bursting point. And climate change has a lot to do with it because it affects employment, affects food, affects energy, affects urban living systems. And this is where I keep emphasizing net zero is not about an object. It is not about one thing or the other. It's everything. So I want to bring this together. Now, if you look at this, this is from 2009 to 2015. Just look at the number of hot days. In 2009, 43 hot days. 10, 130. 12, 122 hot days. 1300. And 2014, again 133. And then 107. I don't know if you guys see a pattern here. Do you see a pattern here? This pattern comes from another cycle in climate caused by the Southern Oscillation Current, which is also called the El Nino. So the 7 to 10 year cycle, there's the monsoon cycle, we have an annual season, we have a global season that's happening. But each year, the number of hot days, and right now we're in 2026, which is another one. And if you look at on the 25th of May and compare it to 2014, look at how far the peak maximum temperature has gone down from Madhya Pradesh all the way to the coast. And this year, if you would create the number of hot days in India, in the middle cycle, which is there, 2020, we don't have the data because of COVID. I don't know, IMD, maybe the land surface temperature bar, data collectors also had COVID, I don't know, it's not there. So we have higher average temperature, more hot days, higher nighttime temperature so that the night flushing can't happen. as effectively. We have higher relative humidity and wet bulb conditions. You see, I grew up in Delhi, never owned an umbrella or raincoat till I moved to Tamil Nadu 40 years ago. Didn't even know that the concept that rain can wet you. It used to be really hot, dry summers, cool, dry winters, with random rainfall in between. My grandmother, who was born in Pakistan and then moved to Delhi when she was a child, always told me, we are such sinners in Delhi, the rain dries up even before it can come towards Delhi, okay? For me, humidity was not a criteria. People lived with desert coolers if they were rich in the 70s and 80s. All of us just closed the windows and captured the nighttime cooling inside the houses and opened it in the evening, closed it in the morning. So you could have quite a good difference of outdoor-indoor temperature in Delhi. When it was 45 degrees outside, you would have 35 degrees inside because it was a hot, dry climate. Today, Delhi has a humidity in April, May, June, that prevents us from using desert coolers. Evaporative cooling doesn't work. Why doesn't it work? Has Delhi suddenly moved its longitude, latitude from the north to Tamil Nadu like me? No. Why has Delhi got more humidity? More sewerage? More output from the ACs? More water usage because of increased population? More humidity trap because of pollution in the air? So humidity has gone up. So a low impact, low energy technology cannot be used for cooling anymore. So our actions actually make indigenous technologies obsolete, you know. And this is something that we don't understand. In the long run, a lot of our technologies are going to get obsolete because of climate change. And Indian cities are essentially a heat trap. You know, if you look at it, there's complete lack of shade. Then rapid increase in roads and paved area without actually looking at how is it going to impact the buildings around, the people around. Poor transportation system, you know, metros, yeah, great. Metros are there. Today morning I saw at 5 o'clock there was a metro going. So I thought, wow, people in Bangalore get to work quite early for some reason. But what is happening between the metro and us? Nothing. You still have to take your auto, still have to take your car. So transportation, last mile, nobody thinks of in the transportation sector. But the key part is that airflow and ventilation is neglected in land use and development plans. Chennai, if you look at 1920s to now, the land use plan and the road layout, you see a marked change. There is a certain section of Chennai which allows for the sea breeze incursion late afternoon. But there's a majority of Chennai that has grown from 1990s onwards, which if I was not, no, I mean, I'm a malicious person there. I really think the planners thought, kisi ko hawa nahi lagni chahiye. They've basically made the road network in such a way that air movement does not enter into the city from the sea. There's no other explanation for it. It looks like a deliberate exercise taken into account, like, let's see how much we can keep the air out. Because there's no other way. If you look at the road maps that is done of all the peri-urban areas and the greater metropolitan areas of Chennai, and it's the same in Pondicherry. Pondicherry, at 3:34, you would have this fantastic sea breeze coming. Now at 4 a.m. in the morning is when it finally cools down. 12-hour delay in air temperature drop between 1985 to 2025. You know? And this is where one of the major crises is happening in this country. When we talk about sustainable development, we talk about compressed earth blocks and earth walls and domes and arches and celebrate our architects who can do more gymnastics and shapes in earth bricks. I don't know, maybe we need to celebrate something, otherwise we'll get depressed. But this is the main crisis. Change of land use. Look at Chennai from 1988 to 2017. Look at where the water bodies were. Look at where the open lands were, and look at what's it now. And look, I mean, this is, if we want to reverse this, it's going to be an impossible task unless there's a huge disaster like the Black Death in Europe in the 14th and the 15th century. This is an irreversible damage that is done to our cities and country, which a few buildings on earth are not going to cut it. Really not going to cut it. And a few less single-use plastic bags are not going to cut it. You know? And low-flow taps and LED bulbs are not going to cut it. This is a disaster of epic scale. This is, I've taken Chennai because I had, at that point we had worked with this, so I had access to the maps. But if you do this for Bangalore, and I've seen one presentation when a gentleman had shown this for Bangalore, and he had overlaid it with access to drinking water. And the most land use change that happened in peri-urban areas, which went to high-end homes, had access to drinking water. And the people who lived near the water systems, which were low-income homes, their access to drinking water went down. You know? So social inequity, economic impact that follows with land use change, when you map it, it is disgusting. And we call ourselves a democratic country. And of course, this is now the best part. I love this photo on the left-hand side. This is an office that I pass every time I have to go to the airport. You know, market rewards a global international image more than climatic or cultural intelligence, right? Now, if you are a well-known architect, it's because you could do this. And you get invited and you present and you go back home and you feel good. There are the two caste systems. There's the earth creatures who make domes and walls and things like that, and then there are these. In between, there's a vast desert that sits there and uses architecture as an income generation scheme. Soon we will be part of Menerga also. You know, we'll have to have Prime Minister Awas Yojana coming to help us. Because the glass facade has become synonymous with success, no? Cost, prestige and progress and branding. But the worst part is this colonial hangover among the financial manufacturing sector of this country. You know, and we might fool ourselves and think, okay, we are the architects and all that. But the decision making is happening at the finance level. Whether it's a simple home or it is actually entire township. There's a man sitting in the corner in these board meetings, or there's one person in a family, single family home, who basically says, this is the budget. And he or she also decides the style, right? So, and then there's this colonial hangover, vernacular, backward, glass facade, modern. So they want to have CSEB blocks, but with nice big glazing to the garden. And then that way they say, humne ye bhi kiya, wo bhi kiya, no? And that way they can feel like when they have friends over, and there's always, we have a very active social life, Suhasini, so we need that space, no? And then this is the dichotomy that happens. Look at this gate of Tech Pro. They have their little temple. That they're not giving up, right near the gate. And few times a year, the CEO comes and does this little prayer also. But the background, where there's an overhang, which doesn't function as an overhang, I don't know if it's meant to be a pergola also, I don't know which creeper can cling on to that for its life. But that's how it is. And DLF comes down to Chennai, and they also build this. It's amazing. This is all happening in South Chennai, which is prone to urban flooding. Huh? And these buildings all have 3-4 levels of basement parking. So I'm just going to run through this quickly and then close it up. I'm going to just talk about 3 of our projects where we design for thermal comfort, adaptive thermal comfort. And by adaptive thermal comfort, I'm not targeting a certain temperature and humidity. as a benchmark, I'm targeting a difference between the indoor and outdoor temperature to allow, because human body can adapt to quite a bit if we allow it. I mean, the kind of clothing we are wearing for this temperature and humidity, if our bodies would start protesting like any machine, if it was your laptop, it'll just shut down. But we are functioning because we adapt. And this is the aspect that we focus on to say, how can we use this adaptive nature of the metabolic rate of human body to create comfort, okay? So the first one is a building that was built in the middle of several older buildings, which were built in 70s, and there were quite a few amazing trees already there. But the problem that the location of the building that we got from the planning authority was that it was sitting, I think, this is the building. Now, if you see the watershed water flow, we were sitting between two of the streams and right on the apex in a way that all this area, the watershed of all this area was funneling through here and at this point splitting between the two. And it was amazing. And that was the only spot that was available for the building as per the planners. So we decided that we do not change anything of the topography of the land. We will design the building in such a way that the topography is not touched. We don't even cut the branches of any tree. Forget about cutting trees, none of the branches. And yet try to make it good looking enough, because in Orville, a lot of focus is on good-looking buildings. People from outside Orville think we are all building sustainable buildings. No. We build good-looking buildings. And architects are seduced by good-looking buildings. Very few buildings in Orville are net zero or sustainable. But yes, we make good-looking buildings, right? And so you can see here that we kept even these little flow channels that were there and integrated them into the landscaping. But in spite of the restriction of building on a ridge that was between two of the flow rates to a very large area that was connected to 3 village ponds, so that we don't disturb their watershed, that we don't disturb the amount of water they collect every monsoon, we still paid attention to the indoor-outdoor temperature. Yeah. So what we did is, the building is basically long facade north-south, kind of an angle to it. We created these transition zones. Even though it's shaded by the building, we have another problem that comes, shaded by the trees. We have another problem that comes when you build so close to the trees, is that your air flow is cut quite a bit. And in warm, humid climates and hot, humid climates, evaporative loss of the sweat on your body leads to cooling. So that means you need airflow. So we could bring down the temperature inside the building, but the trees were bringing down the wind speed that was entering the building. So by creating porous transitional spaces and making the volumes in such a way that you would create a Venturi effect, in spite of being within the trees, you could increase the airspeed. And that, I don't know if you noticed, in the section elevation, we deliberately created several punches that would allow the air to be funneled in and then expand into the rooms, so that in a micro level we could increase the wind speed. But the present management has decided to close some of it and put ACs. I can't help it because I was kicked out of the project. And so this is what we did. But another thing that we paid attention to is the interiors. We didn't do interiors. What we did is we made the place usable by using furniture that can work without air conditioning. The type of furniture that has always been used in coastal areas of Tamil Nadu, which is wood and cane, wood and string, so that when you stick the damp and greasy skin from sweating, can be taken by the furniture. And that's why interiors of a huge, when I walk into interiors of people who said we have made a net zero building, and I look at the furniture, I said, sure, of course. I mean, an ignorant person would say, wow, beautiful, no? Furniture says it all. And the other thing is, of course, muting of the glare in the building so that even the transition spaces get light, but not the harsh sunlight. And you can have natural light and ventilation to use the indoor spaces without the heat and the blinding glare. And use a lot of stack ventilation for wet areas so that they dry rapidly. One of the worst things that you can have in hot, humid climates is wet bathrooms because they are a petri dish for bacteria. And bacteria lead to smells lead to more chemical products being used to remove the smell, which then kills the bacteria in the toilet pipes, which then leads to a complete collapse of the biodiversity in your sewage system. You know, it's a catch-22. So how do you keep bathrooms and toilets dry? Stack ventilation is one of the key, and it also removes the smell rapidly. The two key building materials that we used here, so I covered the 20 to 25% with the building design, and this is the 8 to 10%, okay? Please remember that. Don't focus on the earth only. Okay. So the walls are rammed earth, and the lower part, which are impacted by driving rain, are made of the factory waste from the kadapa cutting industry in southern Andhra Pradesh. And this is, okay, we can jump this. I don't know, so I am pointing in the, so this is a simulation done with design build. After the design was done, we undertook a simulation to see what if our principles of design actually created the temperature modulations that we designed for. So you have the ground floor, first floor, April, May, June, July, which are the key periods. And you can see that at all times, we have remained between 25 to 35 degrees. We never cross actually 32, 33 degrees. So the indoor temperatures are pretty good. We had data loggers here taking temperatures, and then, like I told you, we were kicked out. Because we do a three-step process. We first put in the design principles, design it, run the simulations, but I don't want to fool myself. All these softwares have been developed by people who never have to live in warm, humid climates. So some of the systems that is embedded in the algorithms does not give you a true picture. And I'm very sorry to say, some of the heat maps that it generates are alarmingly wrong. So we go through a three-step process, design using certain principles, do the simulation, but as far as possible, also do data logging post-occupancy, not before occupancy, because that makes no sense at all. Because when somebody starts using the bathroom, the relative humidity in the nighttime flushing becomes very difficult. So at least minimum 1.5 to 2 years post-occupancy is when we do the data logging. So actually our engagement as architects that is paid for is only with the design. The rest comes out of our own pocket. And we do that, like I told somebody today here, I have an office that you need a microscope to see. It's that small. But 25% of the work that is done is in the design and doing the construction. But the other part, we do between all the other things is stuff like that. And then I engage in discussions with people like Chitra and Rajan Raval and others because they do larger projects in more challenging areas, and their experiential learning helps me without them even knowing in my smaller projects, you see? And this is one of the key things. I mean, forums like ELEV8 and others are supposed to be that, to tap into the experiential learning of each other. Because the three ways of learning, academic, I mean, we all know how great academic learning is structured in this country. and then learning by exposure, but you cannot have all the exposure you need for every learning you need. I mean, you're limited by your commitments, time, energy, money, and other things. But then experiential learning, some that you experience yourself, but some that is experienced by others. This is an enormous resource. And at least when we were coming into the field, Chitra can tell you about it, when we were coming into the field, senior architects actually spent time with us. They were generous with their time. And like if B.V. Doshi was in Chennai, he would have at least 35-40% of the time only for his work. The rest he would be with students and young architects and others. Korea was generous with his time. You could sit, have discussions. We didn't have Zoom, so we met them in person. And we did learn from them directly, you know. And that is where today, with all the technology and the reach of communication, we actually learn less, which is amazing, you know. This is the kindergarten, again, a very small project. Now here we had a definite challenge. For almost 20 years, the kindergarten that existed in Orville, that is between early 70s till early 90s when I did this project, it was huts scattered over 4 acres of land. And the children would just run off the huts when the teachers asked them to do something. And you know, you can't chase these 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds running fast, and none of them wore chappals, so they were running better than their teachers. So finally, when they had the money to build a pakka building, they told me they wanted the building with one central area through which they can look at every child, and every child can only go out of the building through one door and come in through one door. So 20 years of having chased unruly children, they went the whole other way, saying, build as a jail for children, right? So, and there was no amount of negotiation that would make them change their minds. They had suffered enough, especially in the monsoon where it rains 10 days non-stop. Finally, when you catch the child and bring him in, he's muddy, wet, and a disturbance. Now you have to change his clothes also, you know. So they were fed up. They said, Andar ya bahar, nothing in between, okay. So after a lot of nerve-wracking thoughts, we said, okay, we will create the central space that monitors. We will create controlled exits, but we will also create little pods where other activities can take place. Now, this goes against everything in terms of the built volume being towards sun and wind. Everything was exposed, you know. So we were not having a building form that would trap the maximum ventilation and have the least heat gain. So we had to come up with other ways of dealing with it. One of that was this, is to have very deep overhangs, no matter which direction it is. And I have no idea, where is it? Where is this machine that I'm supposed to point at? I need a drone. And in critical areas, create these pergolas with creepers that actually lose the leaves in November, December, but are very leafy from March to July, you know, when we have the maximum heat. So that you have actually enough light, but without having the heat inside. And we planted quite a few large trees, which luckily have grown quite well, that shades the ground around so that it reduces the air temperature outside too and keeps the ground humidity. Because exposed ground without ground cover, the temperatures can go up to 50 degrees centigrade. You know, the air temperature may be 35, 36, but the ground temperature can go up to 50 degrees at midday. And if you plant something without the shade, it's only going to die. So once you have bare ground, you have it forever. It's irreversible. So you first need to create shade, then you can increase the moisture in the soil and lower the soil temperature, and only then vegetation starts coming back. Just by putting a lawn with water, lawn with water, what you get is termites in the end. They love your water and they love the cellulose that you have planted for them. You know, it's like a resto bar that you have done for them. And because the rooms are quite large, they are 8 meters by 8 meters, some of them, we have little skylights. You know, there used to be a tile company called Malabar Tile Company, which used to make these really nice tiles with glass inlay in them. Now, I don't know, they don't even exist, I think. And you see, it's built with CSCB, but it has rammed earth foundation. And we did that to offset the fact that our roofing is made of prefabricated RCC beams, and so that we can have, because it has the form of a traditional tile roof, but it's actually a space structure. And that flat beam, which is the overhang cum gutter, is actually the tie beam for the space frame. And these beams that can go up to 11 meters long are prefabricated on the ground with just 2 bars of steel that you can see here with an S-hook, and then they're mounted, and using ferrocement, the nodes are done. And this is the simulation for it. And there is one spot in May, which is the teacher's resource room, that gets above 33 degrees centigrade. And that is because it has got the worst orientation, and it does not have the possibility to do night flushing because it has window only on one side, you see. And this is one of the critical things that we don't understand, is that large windows we have large windows here, but the window to wall ratio or the window to floor ratio, if you take, is completely insufficient, right? It's not the size of the window, it is the proportion of the window to the space. So we have very large window there, but it cannot produce cross ventilation because it's the wrong place, in the wrong direction, and the door remains closed most of the time. And this is the last project. Here, we could actually complete the data logging, and I'll go to that straight away and then get off the stage. So the 20-25% I was talking about, which is the site planning, orientation and building shape, building and ground shading, location of windows and window to wall ratio, and the insulation and high reflectance. No? So we worked with the sun and the wind and the rain, because unfortunately, though we are in coastal Tamil Nadu, most of the time we have very low wind speed. It's between 3 to 5 meters per second, which is, I would say, fan at speed 1, right? Which is okay. If you can sit around, read a book, or watch a TV, you don't. But if you're going out somewhere and you come back in and you're hot, you need to put it at fan 3 for at least 15-20 minutes till your body temperature comes down. So we want to bring the wind speed to at least 7 to 10 meters per second, especially in certain times of the day, which unfortunately is midday or midnight. And that is when the wind speed almost drops to 0. Why? Because the land and sea temperature are the same. At some point between midnight to 2 a.m. in the morning, there's no sea breeze coming in. And in the afternoon, midday to 3 o'clock, land breeze going out in the night or sea breeze coming in, because both the land and the sea have the same temperature. So there's no air movement. And that's about 10 out of 12 months a year, okay? And our relative humidity, let's not even talk about it. I have a theory, since I moved into Tamil Nadu 40 years ago, and I still have to get used to it, is that people eat idlis in Tamil Nadu because that's what they live in. They live in a pressure cooker. What else can they eat? And people eat tandoor in the north because that's what they live in, you know? It's like almost the food, the climate are synonymous for me. And I keep wondering, how come the market for exotic foods and completely inappropriate clothing seems to have such a success? Because you're not changing your geography, you're not changing what you can grow, but you want to deny both. And where are you going with that? You don't want to eat what you grow, you don't want to clothe where you live. So what are you going to do? And then we talk net zero. You know? And of course, nighttime flushing, which is extremely critical, especially given the fact Like when I came to live in Tamil Nadu in 1985, we used to have 35 to 40 hot days a year. And the last decade, we have crossed 100 hot days a year, okay? Which is more than 3 months a year we have hot days. And the worst part is that the nighttime temperatures are not falling as they should. So the coolest time within a built structure today is achieved only after 4 a.m. in the morning. But by 6 a.m., the sun is up. So you have 2 hours in which the air temperature inside, if it's naturally ventilated, is cool. And then the heating starts again. But it's going to heat up for 12 hours with direct sun. Then the radiated heat from your building material has to all cool within 2 hours. It's not going to happen. So that's why we use AC, no? What else can we do? Because there's no way to cool down the whole volume. So shading is critical. So if you don't want to absorb heat as much as it's there, shading is critical. And of course, the building shape, so that it's self-shading, depending on the direction and the season and the way you have positioned your building on the ground. There's a lot of self-shading that can be done at the cost of course, one part of the building gets hot, but that shades the other part of the building. So if you can work with your functions in such a way that the hottest part of the building is not what you're using during the hottest time of the day, it allows the rest of the building to be in shade. So we did a post-occupancy monitoring for 13 months. And this is what we did with data loggers, humidity, temperature, and lux. So there were loggers that were only doing that. There were loggers for humidity and temperature. And then there were loggers to look at wall surface temperatures, indoor temperature and outdoor temperature. And we put it in different locations. So we put it in the worst locations, that is under the roof, west-facing facade, and where the roof is heating up, the wall is heating up, and there's no shade. We put it on eastern side where it gets certain amount of direct sunlight with no, and the topmost roof, bottom roof, we put it where you get both east and west is well shaded and you're not, and we put it outside next to the building, outside away from the building, so that we get readings that really help us to figure out what is it that our design has achieved. And this is what we got. In June, the outdoor conditions, that means completely outdoors, western side, west facing with exposed, indoor condition, east facing non-exposed. And what we realize is that we cannot escape our geography completely, but at least for the maximum of 50% in the worst case scenario, you still have comfort, adaptive comfort. So that means at least for 50% of the time, in the worst season of the year, in the worst case scenario where you're exposed, wall and roof to the western side, 50% of your time is comfortable. And that, I think, is already good enough. And then I invest in low energy fans, low flow taps, surfaces that are low embodied energy, and also then I go into the building materials, which is 8 to 10%, right? Where, again, we look at efficiency. Before we say, oh, let's go and build with earth. That kind of mad run, which is a quick panacea, no. We say, let's build less. No matter what you use, if you can build less, fantastic. That means functional efficiency. Efficiency in terms of lowering your circulation, and a little bit of psychotherapy with your clients to tell them that just because you put a label on one space, it doesn't mean you can't do something else also on that space. That because it says bedroom, you can't sit and read in it, ek study bhi banna chahiye. Like you take the book, you go and sit and read there, and then you go and sleep here. No, it doesn't happen like that in real life. Or you say dining is only dining and it cannot be a family room, Or living is only living because then when people are there, no. If you actually look at how people live from what they say, it's very different. All of them are in the same room all the time. But when they go to an architect, suddenly they need 25 rooms. And the architect said, "Okay, yaar, there's more work as an interior designer because most of his money is made in interior design, right? Why should he bother?" And efficiency of built volume. Now, this is something that is not as complicated as it sounds. That means if you take the entire surface area of the building, including the floor and the ceilings, and you see how much is the volume contained in it, try to make your design in such a way that you need less walls, less roof, less floor for the same volume. Then you will need less material to build. And less material also means less foundation, less structural demand, less. It's very simple high school mathematics and geometry. I know we studied to pass the exam and then it was to forget it so that we could pass other exams. But in the end of the day, some of the things that they taught us can actually be used and used very easily if you don't get frightened by the fact that the equation has more than one variable, okay? All of us as architects somehow like, oh my God, there's more than one variable, let's ask AI to do it. So then the answer, we don't know how to integrate it because we never worked with it. You know? And then we get into the material. This is poured earth concrete. This project was done with construction and demolition waste using the conventional building equipment like cement mixers, vibrators, shuttering, with construction and demolition waste to make walls. And all the areas that would get the most stress in terms of monsoons are with waste carapa trimmings. And the intermediate floors are segmental walls made with the local low-fired bricks. And above them, that's how it is. And above them, they have filled with shredded thermocol by creating baffles and then doing the floor above it. So that's how it looks when the thermocol has been filled. And you have IPS flooring above it. And of course, even the roofing tiles are recycled ones from the factory waste nearby. And this is the time lags that we calculated for the different materials based on indoor, outdoor to different exposures. And our net zero achieving, of course, we had to then, because no matter what we did, we were still not achieving net zero with just the buildings and the energy use. We had to augment it with energy generation in spite of all these efforts. So that's why I'm saying when you use the word net zero, unless you're really an ignorant person or willfully ignorant person, as architects, the challenge is epic to achieve net zero in any building. You know, it's really, I mean, you have to count a lot. You have no time left to make fancy designs and other things. This is our energy consumption monitored over 13 months compared to the ASHRAE standards, which is at 80. And we crossed 40 once, which was July 2019. And this is our energy production versus consumption to achieve net positivity. And you can see during the first lockdown, everything went down rapidly. And why? Because even solar panels are not efficient if you don't clean them. And to get to the roof to clean the panels when there was a lockdown during those 40 days or 45 days, didn't happen. You know, people were so scared that they were going to die that they even didn't go up to their own terrace. You know, I mean, so this is the only thing I care about. All the rest was to fill up time, okay? In 1948, Universal Declaration of Human Rights, they said these 6 things are human rights, unviolable, no matter what type of government you have. And we can call you on it, even if you're a dictatorship, or a socialist, communist democracy, or just a democracy, doesn't matter, capitalist democracy, that these are inviolable human rights, correct? I would like to add something to it. Right to shade. This has to become a human right. And especially if we want to go towards net zero, it has to become a fundamental human right, shade. Right now, nobody even thinks of it. Everybody looks for it, misses it when it's not there, but does not even imagine that this needs to be enforced as an essential human right. And what best to do, especially when we use a shade that lowers emission. I mean, you have the solution right in front of you. A shade that lowers emission while it increases removal. You reach net zero easier this way than running after some earth blocks. Right? Do your earth blocks, but please keep the trees. Please. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for enlightening us and bringing us back to focusing on the basics. Remember, eat what you can grow, dress for where you live, and safeguard the right to shade. And now I'd like to open the floor for questions. If you'll have a question, please raise your hand. Does anyone have a question? Yeah. Can you get a mic to her, please? No, this mic is
Okay, she's going to get the mic. Don't worry, she's seen you. Yeah.
I really love the presentation.
Could you first introduce yourself?
I'm architect Rukhaya. I'm working at DS2 Architecture. I am really interested in passive design. I also don't believe in using modern equipment for cooling and heating. So, ironically, I'm sitting in a room with the worst ventilation, and I was feeling dizzy actually from the past hour. I tried to listen to your lecture. So, I'd like to ask you, how would you improve this room, like this existing room that is already designed? How would you increase the ventilation? How would you increase the cooling for this room to make it more comfortable for the occupants?
Okay, you see, now if I just look at the size of this room, I don't know if I can use my mic without a Doppler effect. Okay, what is the size of this room? I think we need to switch off that because I'm getting a Doppler effect with that. I don't get Doppler effect. Take it a little bit further away. Okay, so what is the size of this room? 8 meters by 8 meters, right? What is the ceiling height? 2 meter 40. Why? Because they've used almost 1 meter 30 for the AC ducts and all those things. So the room was never designed to be naturally ventilated. They made nice large openings so that you can look out at the landscape spaces, not at get the air in. But when Chitra and I walked in and we asked them to open some windows, at least you could sit here. But morning, since they've been working, these poor men who had been working, men and women who were working, worked with closed windows. This is what I'm saying. You reacted and asking, how can we make this comfortable? But the first reaction should be, what can I do to make it comfortable? Not ask, do. Opening the windows was the first thing. Nobody did it till it was 10:45 in the morning. And I'm sure from what time everybody came in here, at least by 7, those 3 hours when the outdoor air temperature was much cooler, was never let into this room. Then we are all heat producing bodies, right? 37.5 degrees, but with the sweat and everything and the way you're dressed, you must be actually containing the heat, not producing it like us. It rises up. Where can it go out? It's fully blocked. Under the ceiling, ventilation is not happening. So if there were fans, it would just be circulating the same stale air and evening out the hot air. So how can you make this anything different? It was never designed to be naturally ventilated. 3 things that it needs: window to wall ratio. That means at least 90% of it should be openable. We have 40%. Under the roof ventilation, which is not happening, right? And the fact that from between these two sides are not actually the airflow side. Sometimes the breeze comes in and you feel it immediately, but it's not oriented to the prevailing winds of Bangalore. I mean, this country is not meant for so many people also. Okay, I didn't want to go there. It'll be so politically incorrect. Kal mere ghar aa jayenge, कि इसको जलाओ, you know? So what can I do, my dear? कुछ नहीं हो सकता है. पहले से ही हमने ऐसे ही बना दिया है. Okay?
Hello, madam. General question है madam.
A general question. Who are you? Can you give
I'm
your
architect Basaraj Patil. Architect Basaraj Patil.
name? Yes, Mr. Patil.
सोसाइटी में आर्किटेक्ट का कंट्रीब्यूशन ज़्यादा है क्या सिविल इंजीनियर का कंट्रीब्यूशन ज़्यादा है मैम? हमारा यूनियन क्या कर रहा है? सिविल इंजीनियर के यूनियन कैसा है? हमारा आर्किटेक्चर का एसोसिएशन कैसा है मैम? क्या कर रहे हैं हम लोग?
आपको रात को नींद आती है?
नींद नहीं आती इसके लिए।
इस क्वेश्चन को लेकर आपको रात को नींद नहीं आती है कि आर्किटेक्ट का कंट्रीब्यूशन ज़्यादा है या कि इंजीनियर का कंट्रीब्यूशन ज़्यादा है?
हाँ।
इस चीज़ को लेकर आपको नींद नहीं आती है? आपको शर्म आनी चाहिए।
क्यों?
कंट्रीब्यूशन से क्या लेना देना है हमें?
बड़े लोग
नहीं, कंट्रीब्यूशन से क्या लेना देना है? हमें जो काम करना है करना चाहिए बस।
नहीं मैडम, गवर्नमेंट पे लेवल पे आर्किटेक्ट का अंडर सिविल इंजीनियर्स रहना क्या? सिविल इंजीनियर्स के अंडर आर्किटेक्ट रहना?
भाई साहब, ये सवाल आप गवर्नमेंट से पूछिए, वो तय करते हैं।
एसोसिएशन तो है ना मैम?
आई डोंट नो, आई एम नॉट पार्ट ऑफ एनी एसोसिएशन।
सीओए तो है ना, काउंसिल ऑफ आर्किटेक्चर।
हाँ, तो
अशोक गोयल सर क्या बोलते हैं यूट्यूब में, सब लोगों को आईटीआई डिप्लोमा सिविल इंजीनियर्स को प्रैक्टिस करने के लिए नहीं है बोल के बोल देते हैं।
ठीक है,
जो आर्किटेक्ट नाम डाल के प्रैक्टिस कर रहे हैं उनको ये करो, कंप्लीट करो बोल के बोलते हैं। कौन कर रहा है आर्किटेक्ट?
भाई साहब, हमें ये सवाल का जवाब नहीं पता है। Mr. Patil, my problem is that this is not the question that keeps.
One more question, ma'am.
एक क्वेश्चन का जवाब पहले दे देते। हम प्राइम मिनिस्टर तो है नहीं कि उठ के चले जाएंगे। नहीं, आप जो क्वेश्चन पूछ रहे हैं आपके लिए बहुत इम्पोर्टेंट है। हमने इसके बारे में कभी सोचा नहीं और कभी इस पे टाइम भी नहीं दिया। तो सच बताएं,
तो निकलना पड़ेगा ना?
नहीं, मेरे को इसमें कोई दिलचस्पी है ही नहीं। नहीं, मिस्टर पाटिल, हम जो बोल रहे हैं, एक बात सुन लीजिए ना। एक बात, आपको जिस इस चीज़ में जितनी दिलचस्पी है, बहुत खुशी की बात है, मगर हमें इसमें कोई दिलचस्पी नहीं है, क्योंकि ना हमें इससे कोई लेना देना है, ना हमको इससे कोई फ़ायदा होने वाला है, ना इससे कोई हमारी ज़िंदगी में बड़ी ट्रांसफॉर्मेशन आने वाली है। तो हम यही सोचते हैं कि कौन सा काम करें जिससे ज़्यादा लोगों को फ़ायदा हो जाए, और इसमें हम बड़े हैं या सिविल इंजीनियर बड़े हैं, इसका कोई क्वेश्चन ही नहीं उठता है। तो हम क्या करें? हम सिविल इंजीनियर के साथ नहीं, हमारे जो सिविल इंजीनियर, हमारे सिविल इंजीनियर जो आते हैं ऑफिस में, वो दब के नहीं आते हैं, वो हमें नहीं दबा रहे हैं। हम साथ साथ बड़े कोलैबोरेटिव एटमॉस्फेयर में काम करते हैं, बिकॉज हमने स्ट्रक्चर में, आई हैव लर्न स्ट्रक्चर्स इनफ to sit with a structural engineer and work as equal. If architects don't want to understand building systems, building structures, MEP, environment and other things, and expect somebody else to take decision on their behalf and then complain that they are spoiling my design, I think that we deserve the status we are given. That's all. Thank you, Chitra. I should not have engaged.
Two more questions is there. I can ask.
I need to get to the airport. मैं जाते जाते सोचूंगी आर्किटेक्ट बड़ा है कि सिविल इंजीनियर बड़ा। बट एक क्वेश्चन मेरा है, आपको एक क्वेश्चन हम पूछ रहे हैं, हमें आप नहीं, हम आपसे एक क्वेश्चन पूछ रहे हैं, वो अब घर जाके सोचना कि इस फोरम में जहाँ पे हम आर्किटेक्ट्स क्या कर सकते हैं उस बारे में बात करने आए हैं, तो आप अपने क्वेश्चन को क्यों हमारे पे जोर दे रहे हो? बस आप कोई और फोरम में जहाँ पे वो इस चीज़ की बात करेंगे, नहीं तो आपका अपना कॉन्फ्रेंस बना लो ना। आर्किटेक्ट सिविल इंजीनियर कंट्रोवर्सी का कॉन्फ्रेंस बनाओ, हम आ जाएंगे वहाँ पे क्वेश्चन पूछने.